Well, great. Well, let's thank you for sharing those thoughts and for settling into the room. A quick reminder of why we're here, right? This is um, uh, what we think the value is of participating with us and the Bay Area ODN more broadly. Um, yes, there's access to the network and professional development opportunities and meaningful ways to develop your other professional skills. But we hope that there's also some pull as well to contribute to this cool community that we're building that Gene, I think you spoke to very well. Um, we have big ambitions, big goals. We're excited to work on them with you. Um, and with that, I think we'll check back in quickly on the agenda, but then I will hand it over to the capable hands of Maheen to give the initial introduction to shared power and our shared power model in action.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tristan, and thanks for your graciousness with allowing me to reframe that a moment ago. All right, here we are. Let's start. Let's think about shared power together. So here's maybe the big question that we hear often, which is why do we work in a way that isn't traditional? And actually, like in a room of OD practitioners, that's not such a big question, right? But that's something that helped us shape why. Why are we doing this? And we'll answer that next. But first, what does it mean to function as an organization that is not based on hierarchy? So to answer that, we're going to start on the left side of this screen first, and we'll talk about the definition, origins, and some of the features of sociocracy. So sociocracy translates to those who associate together, govern together. And it combines consent decision making, a decentralized system of authority and intentional processes, all to improve our decisions and processes over time into a governance system that supports effective and efficient process. That's a mouthful. So, simply put, nobody gets ignored. We want to do things well, and we improve over time. That's the basis. The origins of this was designed in the 70s by Gerard Endenberg in the Netherlands. And it's based on natural systems, for one point, decentralized nested systems that are semi-autonomous, right? And they are also both autonomous and independent on each other. So you could think of this as like the respiratory and the nervous systems. They are each autonomous, but clearly impact one another. It's also based on a simple set of rules. And we will dig into those, but it's all about circles. Then there's also consent decision making. This has a strong commitment to inclusion and egalitarian values and comes from the Quakers. And then third and finally, it's based on cybernetics, which I'll be honest, I had to look this up. So the definition of cybernetics quickly is the study of communication and control in complex systems, focusing on how systems use feedback to regulate themselves. So sociocracy uses feedback loops to learn about the impact of actions. And again, as OD, change management leaders, right? Like we're all familiar with these concepts. Some of the features, only a few of the features of sociocracy include that we'll start with this most important one. Small groups are the base of everything. Decentralized collaboration through circles and roles is another piece of that, and double linking for information flow and coordination. And we're going to get into that more deeply soon. Meetings are based around consent decision making. There are things like elections and group agenda creation and time management, as well as rounds. You've probably heard of rounds and probably use them in different spaces as well. Continuous improvement is a big piece of it as well. There's a lot of mechanisms for things like meeting evaluations, requirements to set policy review dates, and even something called performance reviews, which I promise you, if that just triggered you in a way, it is not the performance review that you know from the corporate world. Every year you have a performance review. It's quite different. And actually, I found it pretty delightful. All right, so back to the big question, why do we work in a way that isn't traditional? When we look at the intersections of sociocracy and OD, it seems like almost just to dovetail, right? So we have our human-centered focus and we have a systems perspective and all about collaboration. There's also the intersection with psychological safety. It's very much about inclusion and egalitarian values, right? All voices matter. It does facilitate for creative tension and healthy conflict in a way that many systems don't. And then, of course, Kaizen or continuous improvement, which I just shared a moment ago, right? It's all about enablement and distributed authority, but always using accountability tools like building and keeping agreements, participative co-creation, assessing, and iterating. And then one final note here is that at Bay Area ODN, the current version of Bay Area ODN, when we began as a formal nonprofit in 2021, we have since that moment functioned as a group with shared power, meaning that no one has top decision-making authority, not even the president, right? So in 2024, we decided to become an organization that implements sociocracy as a peer governance system that's based on consent to provide structure from existing resources and asterisks, right, to implement sociocracy in a way that serves us as an organization. We're not just taking all of the features and plunking them down into Bay Area ODN. So continuing with that big question, why do we work in a way that isn't traditional? The application of this has been really interesting and fun. We've learned a lot. Again, in 2024, we agreed to implement it, and we began by applying the use of the proposal method and consent decision making, and we are learning together. We're very much practicing, and we do take into consideration and we communicate our own capacity and navigate those conversations together, right? Always considering we all are volunteers who are also really passionate and dedicated to what we do. And it's also important to talk about the limits here, right? So consent requires working through issues in a really collaborative way. And that means it requires a commitment to listening and learning and using its tools. And sometimes that also really means unlearning of practices from maybe other hierarchical texts or traditional spaces that we've been in. I think Gene gave us a quick nod to that earlier when he shared about his story, of this community. We've all been in spaces where that's just how it works, right? Top down. Now, it also works best in organizations that have a certain level of clarity and structure, and also where most members are operationally involved. And then finally, that they can also be a part of decision-making circles in an area where they both have expertise and experience. So I mentioned that circles are the basis of everything. Let's talk a little more about that. Uh, all small groups are called circles. That's it. That's where we start. So you could think of them as teams as well, right? But essentially, everyone has the same amount of power, but there are specific roles. Let me step back for a moment. Sociocracy circles have a defined aim, and that is actually how circles come to be. So it's a description of what the circle is doing. It's sort of verb-based instead of noun-based, right? And a circle also has full authority in a domain, and that has to be defined. Circles will have defined roles within, both to run smoothly and to sort of like package operations into meaningful bits. And any member can fill one or more roles. Previously, I mentioned double linking. So let's talk a little bit about that too. You can see it illustrated a bit here. In our double linking roles, linking roles specifically connect circles to other related circles. In double linking, two people from one circle, sociocracy calls them delegate and the leader. We've simplified it on our end. These folks are full members of a parent circle so that information flow goes both ways, right? It's essentially ensuring that everyone knows about decisions being made or clear on constraints that they need to consider when they're making decisions and so on. It also ensures that there's a backup in case somebody can't be present. And there's a general circle. So you can see here with the blue, very rudimentary general circle here in this visual. The general circle is responsible for long-term vision and holds on to some central activities like finance, also like making decisions about how the different pieces of the organization fit together and alignment across all the circles. Carrying that forward, we are very much practicing and learning together at Bay Area ODN. So it means we are navigating uncertainty, we are sitting in it, we are eating for breakfast, right? And we are designing and evolving it all together. We also, again, take into consideration our own capacity and we discuss and consider what of sociocracy will serve us and maybe what doesn't at this moment in time. I also want to give you just a little more kind of tangible piece on how we currently get work done together on the board. We do a lot of asynchronous collaboration, And we have Google Workspace as a nonprofit. So we use GChat and Docs and Sheets and so on. But we also collaborate in pairs quite frequently, and we have, live meetings. For example, Tristan mentioned, for some of you who were here right at the top, he and I have seen each other weekly for about 2 hours since June, right? And it's been a lot of fun doing that. We as a board have also experimented with using the proposal process or rather applying the proposal process in an asynchronous manner, using even like emoji reactions and things like that. And we learn and we grow. And at our monthly board meetings, we review proposals and then we move through the consent round. And overall, again, practicing, learning lots of things that we might shift, but it's been working, right? We've increased our productivity since we've adopted this. And also, I think it's worth noting that we're very responsive to one another via our internal chat system. So ideally, we would like board meetings in the future to be spaces where we discuss coordination and resource needs and org-wide policy changes, strategic goal process, finances. Whereas now we're certainly using a lot of our time to figure out the structure, right? How are we doing these things and so on. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Tristan.
Yes, with the excellent segue of, while we're working on structure. So what is our structure? Thank you, Mihin, for that overview of kind of the ideological underpinnings of how we are flavoring our particular brand of sociocracy at BA ODN. As being mentioned, circles are verb-based, not noun-based. So spoiler, our practice circle is named that rather than programming. But these are the circles as we kind of currently envision them. The general circle is the board of directors who are setting strategy and ensuring that our projects are all aligned and contributing to our mission. Our engage circle is handling engagement and communication with our member community. So that is designed to cover managing our community spaces on LinkedIn, both our group and our organizational page, collecting feedback from members, and some activities that we've been playing around with around engaging with members directly, lapsed members, in general, building a stronger membership group, a stronger membership community. Build is responsible for our internal infrastructure, specifically designing processes and implementing tools that support our success. So Build is monitoring and maintaining our internal technologies, things like our dearly beloved Wild Apricot web hosting service, or our Google Workspace. But it's also looking at, for lack of a better term, our behavioral systems. So Build will be responsible for making sure that this flavor of sociocracy that we have implemented continues to be implemented, continues to grow, continues to improve. And finally, practice. Practice is our programming circle. They drive our programming, responsible for organizing and executing our regular monthly events, as well as the special events, like this little thing, little soiree we're putting together in October, as well as things like the peer consult, which is kind of teed up and ready for the next iteration. A note on the kind of structure of these circles. Each of these circles has a board member as its circle leader. That term is in the glossary in your handout. And that board member / circle leader is responsible for overseeing the operations of the circle, right? And communicating between the circle and the general circle / the rest of the board. That does not mean that the board member in the circle is the only leader of projects, right? Or the leader of activities that are happening within the circle. For those of you, I think many of you are in the October planning circle. This is a really good example, right? That event lives within the practice circle, but Maheen is the project leader on sub-circles within that event, or within the sub-circle of that sub-circle. So circle leadership does not necessarily always equate to project leadership, just really kind of that main delegate link back into the general circle. An additional note on circles: these circles are not fixed. membership circles they can and they will shift as our resources change, as our needs change, and as the opportunities change. The word partnerships has appeared on screen because we know that there is a great opportunity for a partnership circle that would be responsible for our connection with other OD-minded organizations and, broadly speaking, our kind of public external brand or positioning. Um, we know that's an important piece of work to do. It's a little lower priority than what we can handle right now. But as we get more board members, as we get more resources, it's something that we'd like to create. So circles will change as they fit needs, as we need more or less resources in them. So we've established our circles. What are we doing in these circles? We distinguish between two types of project. And this distinction is really to help keep us as organized as we can be and as responsible towards our capacities within circles and as, again, volunteer individuals. So the first set of projects are we're calling strategic goal projects. These are projects that are really central to achieving our overall strategic goals. For 2025, our two strategic goals are to up-level our programming and to build our internal infrastructure. So strategic goals projects will generally come from a consensus of the general circle. There will be at least a couple of board members involved in moving that project forward. And we'll have some documentation procedures really to make sure that we're capturing information around that decision, that action, that project, capturing it in a way that's consistent with what we need for the future, for posterity. I want to be really clear. Non-board members can, should, and will be involved in strategic goals projects. These are not just board-only projects. Rather, these are just projects that we've identified as being really centrally aligned to our goals, and so they warrant a particular kind of special attention by the board. Other types of project are member projects, and these are projects that are brought by members who are particularly interested or particularly passionate about bringing something to life within BA ODN. These projects will still be aligned with our goals. They will still move the organization forward, but they may not be as mission critical or as immediately urgent as something that would be a strategic goals project. A board member will still be involved in a member project, but more in kind of a sponsorship or participant level, and not necessarily as the project leader to be accountable for driving that project forward. So, talked about circles. We've talked about our project types. Thank you, Amelia. We'll see you later. What are the things that are top of mind for us? What are our kind of current strategic project goals, our strategic goals projects? In the Engage circle, I mentioned the LinkedIn page and the group management. We'd like to create that community more robustly and support it more intentionally. I also mentioned we have some projects kind of floating around how we engage with lapsed members or members who come occasionally, and encouraging them to participate more fully. On the practice circle, I include the October event because it's a great example of the type of project that would be a strategic goals project. And I've crossed it off because we have filled that circle. Thank you for all who are volunteering on that already. It is a case study in how we think this model can work. And I know some of you have been practicing this sociocratic method already. An additional strategic goal or strategic project goal in the practice circle is our peer consult. You may remember those from the beginning of the year. Those are teed up for our second phase. And we are excited to bring some more people in to help move that forward. And finally, in our build circle, we've got lots to do in a data architecture capacity, which is really just organizing our records in a way that can be more easily referenced and more easily usable. This is particularly important given things like proposals that come out of the sociocratic process, being able to easily find those and understand what happened with them. Speaking of our sociocratic processes, we need to build out our, for lack of a better term, documentation about our particular flavor of sociocratic practice so that we can hold each other accountable and continue to learn and grow and develop in that direction. So that was a lot. I want to take a moment to pause us and open up and really explicitly ask for any questions, thoughts, immediately reactions. We are about to get into the practice session. So, Mahina, I reserve the right to say, that's a really good question. Hold on to that question for 10 minutes, and then we're going to answer it when we get into the practice session. But yeah, would love to hear what's coming up for people, or if there are any questions or anything that we can clarify further.